Thank you. This is a presentation of the Ann Arbor Railroad, the diesel era from 1958 to 1982. My name is Andy Bolander. I'm a volunteer researcher with the Benzie Area Historical Society. This is the third presentation out of a three-part series on the car ferries. The first covered the creation of the Ann Arbor Railroad to 1912, and the second covered from 1912 to 1958. The image here is the Arthur K. Atkinson being loaded with triple-decker automobile cars, and that was an important part for why they improved the car ferries. This presentation is possible because of a generous gift from Grant Brown to the Historical Society. He donated all the digital images that he collected while putting together his book, 90 Years Crossing Lake Michigan. The museum at the time did not have enough images of the diesel era to pull this off, so thank you, Grant Brown. Here are the 5 boats of the Ann Arbor Railroad. This is probably taken in 1952 during a strike by the Great Lakes Licensed Officers Organization. All the boats in this image burn coal. From left to right, it's the Ann Arbor number 3, the Ann Arbor number 7, the Wabash, the Ann Arbor number 6, and the Ann Arbor number 5. Missing from the previous image was the Ann Arbor number 4 because it was sold to the state of Michigan and it became the city of Sheboygan in 1937. It worked the straits until 1958 when it became a potato barge. It was later scrapped in Italy in 1973. This is a good image of the Wabash showing some coal smoke coming out. And this was a problem with a lot of the locals. Households around Betsy Bay knew not to hang their whites out to dry if the boats were leaving port because they would get soot on them. Out of all the Ann Arbor boats, the Ann Arbor number 6 was selected to be refit and modernized. The number 3 and the number 5 were too old to be considered for this modification. They chose the upgrade instead of building a new boat because a boat could be refit at 50% of the cost of a new vessel. The Arthur K. Atkinson was a drastic change in exterior design from the previous boats. They raised the car deck height by cutting it open and adding room to accommodate the modern rail cars, the triple-decker cars as previously shown, and it was also made 34 feet longer. Here's the boat out of dry dock in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. If you look on its nose, you can see that it's still named the Ann Arbor number 6. Here's another view, and it's properly named the Arthur K. Atkinson. The boat was named after the president of the Ann Arbor and Wabash Railroads. In the background, you can see the grain elevator. It's a distinctive landmark of Manitowoc Harbor. The Arthur K. Atkinson was the first diesel car ferry on the Great Lakes. This is the engine room of the Arthur K. Atkinson. This is one of the images from Captain Bacon's collection at the Clark Historical Library at Sydney. Here are some other interior images showing the modern decor of the Atkinson. It's particular to note the color of the window coverings and the conspicuousness of the ashtrays. These are the new propellers and for the Atkinson, and they're new because they have variable pitch. Their blades can be turned so that they can give 100% thrust going forward. Also, steel is used on the Great Lakes because there's no salt water, so they don't have to worry about corrosion. The Arthur K. Atkinson is one of the easier boats to identify that worked for the Ann Arbor car ferries because of its unique stripe on its smokestack. The ice-breaking abilities of the Atkinson were limited by its variable pitch propellers. They could get 100% power going forwards, but only 80% power going in reverse. This is important because a technique for breaking ice, as you can see in this image, is that they push the boat onto the ice to crush it, and then they back up and they try it again. And they do that over and over again until they can get through. You can see that the boat is indeed on the ice by seeing the location of its bow. Here's an image from 1960 of the Arthur K. Atkinson loading double-decker rail cars. Looking at this collection of the boats, the Arthur K. Atkinson sticks out with its design. Early on, the Atkinson struck a crib outside of Kewanee during the fog. This photo was after when it went to the dry dock in Manitowoc. The Ann Arbor number 3 left the fleet in 1962. It is the longest operated railroad car ferry at 64 years. When the Chief of Wadham was repaired, it worked the Straits of Mackinac in 1967, stripped its sides to the barge, and it was known as the Manistee. Currently, it is also a barge. It is known as the Whale in New Orleans. Here, the Atkinson is breaking the Wabash out of the ice. Images from 1963. A technique to break out of the ice is so the boats would pass each other as close as 10 feet apart in an effort to break out of the ice. The next boat to be modernized was the Wabash. They converted it from coal to diesel power. This boat is still named Wabash despite its upgrades. Here's the city of Green Bay at the apron, and you can see that they have an issue loading their rail cars. If a mistake was made while loading or removing rail cars, it could be a disaster on the apron. It would shift the weight of the boat while in port. An example of this is when the Ann Arbor number 4 flipped onto her side in 1909 at Manistee. This is what the apron should look like during operations. Now named the city of Green Bay, here the car ferry is running light. You can see how high it is in the water. This is the Ann Arbor number 5 in port in 1966. It was remodeled in 1948, but that affected her efficiency as working in the ice and also reduced its speed. The Ann Arbor number 5 was sold in 1966. It was sunk near South Haven and became an underwater barrier for a power plant. By 1970, underwater keel had broken in several places. They tried to tow it out, but the rear section sank while it was being moved. The last boat to be remodeled was the Ann Arbor #7, here known as the Viking. This was the only car ferry to travel the Sioux Locks of the Ann Arbor fleet. Its dry dock was at Superior, Wisconsin. Here are pictures while in dry dock. You can tell it's the bow of a car ferry by the slope of its nose, designed so that it can rise up onto the ice and use its weight to break the ice. This is a picture of the Viking engine room. It has a modern design. The Viking was unique in that it was a diesel electric car ferry, meaning they had diesel generators and then they used electricity on the propellers. It's a nice image of the Viking at night. This is another one of Captain Bacon's pictures at CMU. Here's the Viking in the city of Green Bay. On the right, you can see the life-saving station that was used as a marine office. The man on the right in this image is Captain Bill Bacon. He was the port captain for the Ann Arbor Railroad from 1963 to 1981, and he was also important to the Benzie Area Historical Society. He helped install several memorials in the area and also added to the collection of the museum. It's a view of a switch engine loading the Viking. You can see the 3 flat cars used as a barrier to keeping the engine, the switch engine, from getting onto the car ferry and tipping it over. In the background, you can see large asphalt tanks. Automobile transport was on the car ferries in addition to the rail cars that transported along the car ferries. The first advertised schedule that had fares for automobiles was from 1931. It can be quoted as saying, "It is not necessary to remove gasoline while being transported," implying that people had removed all the gas from their tank before getting on the boat. The transit price with the passenger fare was $7. The city of Green Bay was towed out in 1974. It was eventually scrapped in Spain. At this time, there were 2 remaining car ferries, the Arthur K. Atkinson and the Viking. In 1973, the Atkinson burned out a bearing in its crankshaft. Leaving the Viking as the only operating car ferry. This image is of Vincent Malapathy. He started the Michigan Interstate Railway Company, which took over after the Ann Arbor Railroad became defunct, and he kept the operations going through 1982. They paid to repair the Arthur K. Atkinson. This image is of its rechristening in August of 1980. It's nice to see the people's heads sticking over the bow and out of the portholes. Christy Fought, the 1980 National Hang Gliding Queen, is breaking the bottle of champagne. And on the left is Vincent Melanchthony. Another night shot of the Viking. The Viking was the most effective car ferry during this period, but it was cold to work aboard during the winters because it didn't use any boilers. It used electric heaters. To help the Viking, they leased the city of Milwaukee in 1978. Here on its fantail, you can see that its hailing port is Lansing. Here's a picture of the city of Milwaukee in Manitowoc. This photo is taken by David Plowden, and it's held at the Yale University Library. There are other photos by David Plowden of the Ann Arbor car ferries, usually involving the stacks. They're also at the Yale University Library. This is the Alberta Rail Yard, 1979. You can see the Viking at the apron, snow plow, and a switch engine on the left. This aerial view is of the Alberta Railroad. You can see ferries at the east and west slips. This was taken around 1980. You can also see the numerous asphalt tanks that were used for road construction. These tanks were owned by the Gustafson Oil Company. Here's the roundhouse at the rail yard in 1980. City of Milwaukee was operated by the Ann Arbor Service from 1978 to 1982. Here are the stacks of the City of Milwaukee, the Arthur K. Atkinson, and the Viking. The Ann Arbor Car Ferry Service ceased on April 26, 1982. Captain Bruce Jewell was the last car ferry captain. This image is from October of 1982. With the cessation of the services of the rail and car ferries, Benzie County lost good union jobs. This is after the closing of operations. The life-saving station was later moved 200 yards to the east into Waterfront Park in Alberta. Here, May 11th, 1983, the Viking was being towed to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. It later rested in Menominee and is currently being cut down to a barge. On the 25th of April, 1984, the Arthur K. Atkinson is towed out to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. The Atkinson was later scrapped at the Tour Village in 2012. The blame for the stoppage of the Ann Arbor Railroad services is pointed in many directions. The unions, poor management, the state of Michigan, Vincent Melanchthony. But who is the blame, really? James Mitchell Ashley, the founder of the railroad, is to blame. The railroad was created to exploit an inefficiency in the Chicago rail yards. where rail cars could be lost for up to weeks at a time. Once those inefficiencies were remedied, it was hard for the railroad to be profitable. The picture on the right is of the Ann Arbor #1 prior to its first voyage to Wisconsin. The city of Milwaukee was moved to Manistee after being stationary in Frankfurt Harbor for 18 years. Lots of feelings are still held about that boat. The boat is in the good hands of the Society for the Preservation of the Steamship City of Milwaukee. It has been a museum ship since 1984. It's recently identified as Museum Ship of the Year by the Steamship Historical Society. Here's the sign for the Seafarers International Union, or SIU. Behind it is a sign for Baker's Bar, now known as Dinghy's. Strikes were caused by the Great Lakes Licensed Officers Organization, the Seafarers International Union, rail or coal unions. It is rare for us to have pictures of people operating the boats. Images of the crew are rarely identified, and most of our identified images are of officers. It's important to note that Captain Alex Larson also served as the mayor of Frankfurt in the 1940s. This is Captain Art Fredrickson. He is the most important captain in my opinion because he was a collector of car, ferry, and railroad paraphernalia, which now lays in museums. So it helps us tell the story of the car, ferries, and railroad. He was so persistent that once when a boat was being closed down, he was refused access onto the boat. And while they were conversing with him, he had a guy on the far side of the boat getting the items that he wanted off of the boat. Most of Captain Fredrickson's collection is held by Bowling Green State University in Ohio. The village of Alberta has had a hard time since the car ferries left with all those union jobs leaving. Much of the boat landing property remains undeveloped and is held by a land developer for the past 30 years. This image reminds me of a print made by local artist Greg Jars. Here's the Ann Arbor #5, the Bull of the Woods. I like this image because they're attractive boats and it captures the action in unique approach to getting the job done. I like to remember the boats as being on the water. And this is the last picture I'd give you as this 3 presentation discussion. Thank you.